Hello, everyone, and welcome to our last session of today. We have Amy Abel here with her session on SQL Server Split Brain, navigating availability challenges and preventative strategies. Amy, over to you.
Awesome. Andy, do you want to start?
Sure. Before we begin, I will also be moderating this session as well. Amy has asked that all questions be held until the end of this presentation. I will be monitoring both the Slack channel and the webinar Q&A. So if you happen to have any questions, please send them on over. We'll make sure that Amy gets to them afterwards. Otherwise, Amy, the floor is yours.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. And thank you for having me. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for being here. Today, we're going to discuss the high availability challenges and preventative strategies. Mainly, we're going to talk about split brain. My name is Amy Abel. I've been with Advanced MD for the past 5 years. I'm a senior DBA. I'm married. I have 2 dogs. I enjoy jeeping, traveling, speaking, mentoring, and I have a ton of passion around SQL Server. It's funny because we were just talking about Ireland, and that's one of the screenshots that I have in there is when I went to Ireland last year. But yeah, one of my favorite things is to solve complex problems, which is why I'm here today to talk about preventing split brain scenarios in SQL Server. And then I also put on there my blog post site, AAA-DBA.com. I'm always open to new blog ideas. Like if you guys want me to blog about something, if you're having an issue with something, definitely let me know. And then I do have my LinkedIn in there if you want to add me as a contact. Before diving in, I want to thank AKB and everyone involved for organizing this event, including Andrew, Anthony, Mark, Marsha, and any other presenter or helper that was attending today, and especially Andy Yoon, who's going to be moderating for me. Okay, so I'm having a nice calm day, focusing on possibly rewriting a horrible merge statement, when all of a sudden everything goes sideways. Boom! Now, if you're not awake, you are now, right? So all of a sudden, errors and clusters are going sideways. The production servers are randomly failing over. They're leaving some bizarre state where the clients can't even access their data. Just like that, the entire environment is in chaos. So, you know, by that time, the other DBAs are on board. We're trying to ping the listeners, but half of the clusters are getting nothing. And my team's notifications were blowing up. Customers are frantically calling in. The queue is building. My boss is demanding answers. And then I am completely in the dark because I have no sense of what is going on around me. And this is the reason why I am presenting today, because I'm sharing some firsthand experience on split brain, and I want to educate others to help prevent you from having this nightmare. Because if you've ever heard the saying, prevention is better than a cure, that's absolutely true. Now, during this session, I have 3 goals, and I hope that you can help me achieve them. The first one is I want you to understand what split brain is. And this is very important to me because not very many people know what it is. I was actually talking to someone yesterday in the lunchroom, and I was telling him, yeah, I'll be presenting on split brain tomorrow. And he's like, what is that? That's a little bit concerning in our, SQL Server area. So the second one is I want you to know what causes the split brain, because that's also important, especially when you're trying to prevent it. And then the third one is, how are you going to prevent it? I know that this can seem like a very complex topic, but I'm going to make it easy today. So let's start with some concepts and some terminology to ensure that we're all on the same page. Now, I know that some of you might be experts in SQL Server. Trust me, I know you're probably better than me at SQL Server at this point. But I think that this might also be helpful just to go over the basics for other people in this meeting. So in SQL Server, a node is a single server within a cluster. Each node has its own hardware, its own software. It can run SQL Server independently. A cluster is a group of connected servers called nodes, right? So if you hear me use the word node or server interchangeably, it's because I'm talking about a server/node within a cluster. Now, they work together to keep the database running smoothly, and it's supposed to make it more reliable. If one server or node fails, then another one can quickly take over, and that minimizes the downtime. Typically, a cluster has a primary and then one or more secondary servers. You can have up to 8 secondary servers in SQL Server, and this assures that your data is, now, I'm not going to say always available, because in my career, it's not always been available, but it does reduce your downtime if the primary fails. So remember, in a cluster, you generally have a primary that's the one that's in charge, right? And we're going to be very, I would say, simple in this presentation, because there are going to be other ways to cluster, but we just want to get the 3 goals accomplished here. So a quorum is like a voting system that helps decide which server should be in charge in a cluster. If there is an issue, the quorum assigns a vote as the primary, and that prevents conflicts. And you'll see why that's important. Now, this is the coolest thing ever, and I had to include it. But nodes send a regular heartbeat, and it comes through as a signal. They show that they're running. So if a signal is missed, a node is assumed that it's failing, and then it checks in with the quorum resource to decide which one should stay active. This constant heartbeat monitoring ensures that the cluster remains stable and the nodes don't act independently. Now that we understand what a cluster and quorum are, let's define split brain. Now, split brain happens when 2 or more groups of nodes, they lose connection at once. And then once the connection is restored, both of the servers think that they are the primary, and that causes conflict. Now, you can see that this could be a little bit confusing, right? Especially for the cluster. Now, I want to point something out. We just accomplished my first goal, and that's that you understand what split brain is. So you can go home and tell your friends that if you didn't understand what split brain was, you actually know what it is now. And maybe you will look really cool around your employee, or, you know, your friends or the people that you work with. So that's a big milestone. You learned something new today, hopefully, and maybe you'll learn some more. So let's take a look at how split brain scenarios can happen. Understanding these causes, it's very critical for preventing them and keeping your cluster stable. Here's some common factors that can lead to split brain scenarios. The first one is network failures. That can cause issues between the nodes, and it can lead them to acting independently. Incorrect settings, that can result in nodes not agreeing on the cluster state. Issues with storage hardware, that can isolate parts of the cluster. And you have bugs, and that can cause glitches, and that can disrupt the communication and coordination between the nodes. And then our favorite, power outages. They can affect the cluster, and that can cause the nodes to become isolated as well. Now, I know some of you are saying, well, I'm in AWS. We're not going to have any power outages. Yeah, sure. AWS power outages can still occur. I hate to tell you that. Other split brain causes. Now, if the quorum is not properly configured, or if the nodes lose communication with each other, the cluster might struggle to determine which one's the primary node. If you have complex failover logic, that can cause unpredictable failovers, and that can lead to conflicting decisions among the nodes. Incorrect manual interventions. Now, a lot of people are like, well, we don't have to do anything manual. Well, that actually depends, because sometimes you're going to have a node that needs to be restarted because it's in a funky state. network reconfigurations that happen within the team, like maybe you're doing something in AWS or changing VPCs or whatever it is that can cause network blips. You can have planned maintenance that happen that can cause split brain. Maybe you're doing OS patching and maybe you need to restart SQL. All of these things are things to consider. Resource contentions, issues like limited the memory, CPU usage if it's high, you know, and the node's not being, it can't communicate, it's too overloaded. That can disrupt the communication within the cluster as well. And that can lead to split brain. To understand what causes split brain, I think we need to consider any situation that can potentially bring a server down. Now, you're probably wondering why I'm so excited right now, and that's because we're already moving along. We've accomplished my second goal, and that's that we understand what causes split brain. So remember, any situation that could potentially bring a server down, even multiple server down, because remember, definition of split brain. And then a split brain scenario in SQL Server can significantly impact data integrity, availability, overall system functionality. And we're going to look at some of those side effects. I'm not going to try to scare you, but it is pretty scary. When you're in the weeds anyway. I mean, I never want to deal with it again. Okay, so in a split brain scenario, nodes working separately can make conflicting changes to the same data. When they try to sync, when they try to sync back up, that leads to data corruption because of the inconsistencies, making it difficult to determine what the correct version is. Recovering from split brain is very difficult. It's time consuming. It's often challenging. It also increases the DBA workload. Most of the time, if not all of the time, I'm going to tell you that manual intervention is normally needed, and it comes from a DBA. Transactions that occur before split might not be properly recorded. That leads to lost transactions and data gaps. Now, let's talk about some key preventative strategies to maintain a stable cluster environment and avoid issues like split brain, because you know, the most important part about this presentation, like I said, is that you understand what it is and you understand how to prevent it. There is a quorum configuration, and this is critical for a clustered environment because it ensures that most of the servers agree on the cluster state before making any changes and that its operations continue. This agreement prevents situations where a server might act independently, which can lead to split brain issues. And then SQL Server supports different models to help manage this process. We're going to talk about those models. And I added some slides in here so that we can look at what those examples might be. The first example is node majority vote. Now, node majority vote is kind of less common, but I don't want to say that because everybody's environment is going to be different in the way that they do things. So I can't say one is less common than the other without knowing how everything's built. But the great thing about it is that it's just very straightforward. So it's based on the number of nodes, and as you can see in the screenshot here, nodes, remember servers, we have 4 here. So we have 4 votes. Each server has a vote. And this requires an odd number of nodes to avoid ties. So for instance, if you have 4 servers or two servers in an environment, node majority might not be the best if you don't have dynamic on, but we're going to talk about dynamic. So I don't want to confuse you. I should have actually just put 3 servers on the slide because generally that's probably what you would want is 3 or more on a node majority. So the advantages are that it's high fault tolerance and it's consistency. It's simple to understand and implement. There's no need for additional resources like a disk or a file share witness. But the disadvantages are that it requires a majority of nodes to be operational, which can be challenging in larger clusters. Network partitions can result in loss of quorum if majority is not maintained. So one of the things, the reason why I say majority is because you need to have majority of your cluster up and running, your votes up and running in order for you to have your cluster healthy. And I'm going to show you examples once we get through each node majority of what that would look like. The disadvantages are that this requires, this can require a lot more cost. So for instance, if you're just building a server in AWS to have it used as a tiebreaker or an extra vote, and you're not using it, it's probably going to be expensive, right? The other thing is that if the network has issues and most of the majority is lost and it cannot be maintained, then that's a problem. So there's just a few advantages and disadvantages for each one, and it's just going to depend on what your environment has and what you decide is best. The next one is the example of a node and disk majority. And this model combines the votes of the nodes with a quorum disk. And the disk helps provide additional stability, acting as a tiebreaker if the nodes cannot agree. Now, the requirement for this type of setup is that you need to have a shared disk that all the nodes can have access to, which also have a vote. And then the LUN should be about 512 megabytes and excluded from the backups or antivirus scanning. I wouldn't do I would keep that as a best practice based on the documentation that Microsoft provides. Now, the advantages are that it increases the resilience of node failures. The disk witness can help maintain quorum during a split brain scenario because you have that tiebreaker vote. And then it's suitable for clusters within an even number of nodes. Because we talked about it a little bit in the very beginning of the slides, is that we should probably have, you know, a node majority, an odd number of votes. And we'll talk about that a little bit more too, as I give you some more examples. The disadvantage to this whole example is that it requires a reliable shared solution. If it's not reliable, do not use it. If it is something that you're going to have to do anti-scans on or antivirus scans or anything like that, you probably shouldn't use it. But like I said, it's a learning process, right? And then also the other thing is the disk witness can be a single point of failure if it's not properly managed. So that's some reasons why it would be good and it may be bad. There is a newer option. If you are in the cloud, we're not going to cover too much on this one because the fact that it is more Azure based, but I kind of just wanted to give you an overall description for people that are in the cloud and they are using Azure, that there is a cloud-based witness available. And this one uses a cloud service as a witness to form a quorum. And the cloud witness is lightweight. It's hosted in the cloud, and it just requires a few things. One, that you typically have, you know, it can work with any amount of nodes, but you probably want to have 3 or more. It also has that you also are most likely going to be in Azure, because if you look up documentation, it's the Azure Cloud Witness. And then the other thing is that you need a reliable internet connection, and it's all going to depend on how you're set up. Personally, like, I don't know if I would, I was excited about the Cloud Witness, but after reading lots of blogs and people that were using the Cloud Witness, they seem to have problems. And the reasons why is because they did not have the reliable internet connectivity to the cloud service. and they also had latency issues. So like I said, it's something that you're just going to have to figure out, learn, and see what works best for your environment. The advantages are that you don't need an additional on-prem hardware or storage solution. It simplifies the setup, and it could reduce the cost. Now, everything is going to come at a cost, so I can't say it's going to be cheap. But if you're using a tiebreaker, you know, an instance as a tiebreaker, this probably is going to be a cheaper option for you. And then it's also suitable for clusters even with an even number of nodes. So the disadvantages: you need to have reliable internet connectivity, access to the cloud service. You know, you're going to have possible latency issues depending on the location of the cloud service that's relative to the cluster. You're going to have ongoing cloud costs, and it, you know, it might be minimal, but it's just something to. The next example would be node and file share witness majority. And this is a combination of node votes and a file share. So the file share acts as a witness, and this setup also helps dissolve, you know, any disagreements in the cluster that if they can't make any decisions because of a node is down. So it plays a part in a vote. You should make sure that the file share is at least 5 megabytes, that has access to the cluster and all the nodes. It's joined to the domain, and your version will depend on what's available. So for instance, if you're in SQL 2008, well, that's going to be a little tricky for you. So I would say look at your version and see, you know, as far as all of these options that I'm kind of throwing out there, is what's going to be available for the SQL version that you're on. If you're on SQL Server 2016, you're probably going to have, if not most or all of these options, because I'm thinking back and I think that's, I mean, even 2012, you're probably going to have a lot more options, but not 2008. I hope you guys aren't on 2008 anyway. But anyway, this must be dedicated to a single cluster, and it's not used to store your user or application data. You can have one file share at a time on your cluster. Reason why I want to bring this up is because, you know, if you're wanting extra votes and you're trying to play the system, you're probably thinking, well, why can't I just have 2 file shares? And then, you know, I can have the less nodes to vote, right? No. When you go to add a file share, it will take the other file share offline. You ain't gonna trick the system here. So I just thought I'd throw that out there. Now, advantages are that similar to node and disk majority, is that using a file share can be more flexible. It can be easier to set up. You don't need to have a huge infrastructure. The only thing that you need is like we talked about, the prerequisites of a file share. So no need for shared storage infrastructure is basically what I'm trying to say. It's suitable for clusters that, especially if you're using an even number of nodes, like this is going to be beneficial for you. And you're going to understand why here in a minute. Now, the disadvantages are that it does require a reliable network share, which can be a single point of failure if it's not. You do need to maintain majority still, because when I'm saying majority, if majority of your environment goes down, your cluster is not going to be up and running anyway. So you need to consider that. Network latency and connectivity issues can also impact the quorum here. Now, a reason why you would want to use the file share is if you're not able to use the cloud witness because your cluster nodes don't have reliable internet connection, and your disk witness can't be used because there aren't any shared drives to use the disk witness. So this is the reason why you would want to fall back on the file witness SPO. This one right here, this one's deprecated. It's something that I would say that if you're using this, I would definitely look at your environment and look at other options, because this is heavily outdated. This is no majority, it's disk only. This is the traditional 2003 quorum disk model. This is an older model that relies on the quorum disk for making the decision. And it's not recommended anymore because of the other models that are offered. It just requires that you have a shared disk that have access to all the nodes. The advantages are it's simple to configure, it's easy to set up and manage. There's no need for a majority of nodes to be operational, obviously, because you're relying on the disk. It's suitable for small clusters or, you know, highly volatile environments. But the disadvantages are that you're going to have a lower fault tolerance as because the entire cluster relies on that single point of failure, the disk. So it's not going to be resilient, and you're prone to having issues and failures. So this one, I'm not going to really talk too much more about, just because of the fact that I would stay away from that. Okay, dynamic quorum. Now, this is an awesome concept. I should say it can be awesome. Dynamic quorum allows the cluster to dynamically assign the votes. I believe this came in the version, so this feature was added in 2012 R2, and there was a reason why. And it was because of the fact that they needed some way to make sure that there was always going to be an odd number of votes. And so it's kind of cool depending on how you use it. This feature ensures that the cluster continues operating with if there's just a remaining node. And that's the concept that you might hear of last man standing. So for example, if you have a 4-node cluster without a quorum witness, the quorum would require 3 votes. Remember, because we have to have majority. Without 2 nodes, the cluster would just go offline. Especially if you just have 2 nodes and one of the cluster goes offline. Like, what's going to happen there, right? This feature is on by default. You can turn it off. That's not recommended. I think it's a cool feature in SQL Server. Some people might agree and disagree with me, though. So, node voting. We're going to summarize node voting just so that you understand this part of it, because it can get kind of confusing. And I'm hoping that my next slides really simplify what I'm trying to present, because this part is very important. The summary is that node majority is best for high node availability, right? It's simple, but it requires majority of nodes. You want to have at least 3. Node and disk majority. Now they add resilience with a disk witness. It's suitable for potential node failures, but it requires shared storage. Node and file share majority. Now it's flexible with a file share witness. It avoids shared storage, but depends on the network reliability. So if your network's not reliable, that might be a problem. And then no majority. This is deprecated. It's disk only. It's simple, and it might be suitable for small clusters, but let's face it, there's other options available that might work better for you anyway. So in scenarios where there is an even number of nodes, just consider configuring an extra node or disk as a witness to provide an odd number of votes, and that's going to help you prevent split brain. So this is going to be quiz time. Now this is without dynamic on, because remember, you can disable the dynamic feature, and the dynamic feature is more of a balancing act. you're going to understand a little bit more when I explain how it works. You're going to be like, ah, yeah. So without dynamic on, remember the nodes that get readjusted based on the dynamic. This is off. Okay, question. You have 3 nodes and 1 goes down. How many votes do you have? 2. You have 2 votes. Now, let's say that you have another option where you have 2 servers and 1 goes down. What happens? Your cluster's down. You don't have majority anymore. You had 2 servers, and at that point, your cluster's probably going to have some problems. Now, the dynamic thing is kind of cool, in my opinion, and this is why. Let's say that you have with dynamic on. Okay, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 servers, and then we have a file share. That's a total of 5. How many votes do you think it's going to give you with dynamic on? This is a trick question. 3 votes. Now, some would say, wait a minute. No, there's 4 votes. 1 went away. Why? How did you get 3? Well, with dynamic on, it makes sure that it has an odd number of votes. So for instance, it will say, okay, we want to keep odd, so we only have 3 votes. It may not count one of the nodes automatically. It just readjusts. And then it just does that. And then so when you take servers online and offline or whatever, it just readjusts. It's really cool. With dynamic on, so we have 3 nodes and then a file witness. I should say, yep, file share witness. How many votes do you think are here? 3. If you said 3, you're right. It's because of the fact that at first it probably said that there were, 3 nodes and 3 votes available. Once one of the nodes went offline, it counted the witness as 1 vote because it's dynamic. It switches. Same thing. You have 2 that go down. It's going to have how many? 3 votes. Now, this is probably one of the most important things that I've learned in this entire process. Always make sure that you have an odd number of votes. Everybody gets a vote here. We're giving them away like Oprah. The other setting that I think that you should probably focus on, and this one bit me a little bit, and that's why I'm bringing it up, because a lot of people don't look at their cluster configuration settings. And there's a setting within you when you go to roles and you go within your owner settings, you can check to see what nodes are owners. The reason why they do preferred owner settings is it lets you choose which servers should run specific resources in the cluster. And that ensures that the right servers handle the tasks, especially during the issues like network problems. It's important to set this up properly, especially if you are in a multi-region setup where one region may not be active. I am probably guessing maybe 50% of the people watching this are probably more multi-region these days, just because I know that a lot of people are working with disaster recovery options and they need to have those available. Essentially, you're basically just telling the server, you're telling the system who you want in charge in case something goes wrong. I would definitely look at your automatic failover thresholds and your automatic failover settings. This is another great reason to pack on the last example that I gave, and that it's this. If you have a region that is not being used and you have it set to having automatic failovers and it should not fail over to that region, that's going to cause problems, right? So I would look at that. Like if you're having a disaster recovery setup And let's say that, for example, maybe you're in AWS and you have some in maybe the West or the East or vice versa, Oregon, Ohio, however you want to do it. And you never use that other option unless you really have to. You should be changing your automatic failover options to manual, to not go to that one if it's just being set up and it's not being used. Now, I know everybody's going to have a different opinion on that, but that's just something that I learned. And then the other thing is like, let's say that you're doing OS patching. There is an automatic failover setting in the cluster that a lot of people don't know about, and it's this screenshot right here. You can set the thresholds, and it defines how often you allow a failover to happen. What happens is, let's say that your maximum failover threshold for one period is 6 hours. If you fell over more than one time that 6-hour period, it's going to leave your cluster in a really funky state. If you're doing OS patching and your plan is, okay, I'm gonna go patch the secondary, I'm gonna fail over within a couple of hours and then fail back over and patch it. No, this needs to be changed. Now, don't go and set it to 10 or anything ridiculous. The reason why you want to have it set to low and it's automatically set to low is because if you have flipping, you want to catch that. Where if it keeps on failing over, you want to catch that. This is going to make sure that you understand what is going on. So like if you have it to max failure period, specified period is like maybe once or twice in a 12-hour period or something, it's not going to kill you. But if it has a set to 10, I don't think that's a good idea. So that's going to help you monitor what's going on in your system, and it's going to help your cluster make better decisions. I think, in my opinion, just because I've gotten bit with that in the past too. I think it's important to set up monitoring tools and scripts to regularly check the health of your servers and your network connections. If problems are detected, like maybe you have failovers that are happening, or your network goes down, maybe getting alerted before your customers let you know is probably a good idea. You can use tools like the failover clustering manager. You can use external tools like VictorOps, SQL Sentry. I know that we have things going into SQL Sentry and it gives us alerts when we're seeing failovers so that we can be right on the ball. What is going on? Why did that server fail over at 7 o'clock or noon or whatever when it's not supposed to? There's VictorOps. VictorOps is an alerting service. They also work with Splunk. That's a good one. And then AppDynamics is another awesome one I like. I don't know if I mentioned Nagios again or if I already mentioned, but that's another one. But if you don't have alerts set up in your system to let you know when things are going wrong, I would be looking at that like really like soon. That's going to be a problem. Testing. Oh, please do not go back to work and add a file share witness to your production environment immediately and say, Amy Abel said that we need to have an odd number of votes and we just need to set it up because this is going to prevent us from having split brain, and then have your entire production environment go down because you did not test in a lower environment. You need to set up all of these things that you're going to be doing to test your cluster, to help to prevent split brain. Any of these configurations that you're doing, they should be done in a lower environment. Stager dev should be taking the hit first. The other interesting thing is that I'm finding that not a lot of people test their disaster recovery options, and they really don't test they don't test failovers. They don't test whether the network goes down and what is going to happen. Even though they have, maybe they have a 5-node cluster environment or a 3-node cluster environment and it's all beefy and set up in AWS, a lot of them don't test that. And that should be another thing on your list, is that setting up, testing, simulations so that your environment is not blowing up like this picture. So remember, like, test everything that you're looking at doing today in a lower environment. The reason why? It's because when I was testing my scenario, I took down the entire dev environment. But it was dev, right? So that's why I'm saying that. Documentation and trainings. It's very important that you ensure that your team understands the concept of split brain and all of the scenarios and the specific configurations that you're putting in place to prevent them. Document the cluster configuration, procedures for handling these potential situations. And that's important because we run up against cost savings initiatives within our companies, right? It happens all the time. So let's say that you added a file share to prevent split brain in your environment because you're only using 2 nodes. And then all of a sudden, you know, a new manager comes in and says, we need to save $20,000 a month. Let's get rid of all the file shares. They're not even being used. Well, that's a problem because that $20,000 might be a large amount for someone, but it's also a large amount when your customers are not able to get their data for 2 days because everything kind of went wacky and all your databases went into data corruption mode. So, you know, documenting that is also going to prevent issues from happening. Keep your cluster environment up to date with the latest patches. You never know why a patch is happening. Regular maintenance can help address any issues, vulnerabilities that can contribute to split brain. So that's really important too. And then let's do some key considerations. Because of the fact that I know everybody's environment is going to be different. So when you're looking at your cluster and you're trying to prevent all of these things from happening, I'd probably think about factors such as like, how is your network topology designed? How is your geographic distribution? Where is your node placement? All of these are going to minimize the likelihood of network partitions. You know, you just need to look at everything because everybody's environment is going to be different. You know, I could probably say, hey, we run on a 4-node cluster or 5-node cluster. I could probably ask you guys and you would probably say, hey, I run on a 2-node cluster. I don't have a file share. Or I run on a 3-node, you know, we have 2 in the cloud and 1 on-prem. It's all going to be based on what you are looking at. The biggest factors that I have come up against in this whole thing have been on this list. And so I was just going to list them just because of the fact that they were a lot of conversations that came up during this scenario. The first one was cost. Cost is going to be always the biggest factor. I hate to say it, it always is. And the reason why is because a good availability option and disaster recovery option always comes at a high cost. You'd be surprised how expensive it is just to add disaster recovery to your environment or adding an extra node, especially if you have 100 clusters that you're supporting. It gets expensive. Disk share will be more expensive than a file share because you're paying for storage. Adding a 3rd node will be more expensive than adding a file share because you're paying for an extra instance. You know, the other thing is like, what are your SLA agreements? Do you work for a bank? Do you work for a healthcare company? Both of those things are, you know, very important to look at when you're working for companies like that, because your SLA uptimes may be higher than other companies, which does come at a cost. And it also might be a selling point. Because if they're worried about their SLAs, they're probably not worried about spending that $20,000 extra a month. But anyway, what are your data recovery plans in case a failure does happen? Let's say half of your production environment goes down, you had split brain, and it made it so that half of your environment was not recoverable at some point. I don't want to scare you, but I'm just saying, what if, right? Let's say that you lost a bunch of data. or your backups, or you need to restore to backup. How much data are you okay losing? Are you okay with restoring everything? Is your company require the data to be available in 15 minutes, 4 hours, 24 hours? Is there a difference between your SLA and recovery objectives? These are all things that you kind of need to think through, because if your SLA is that you have to have 99.9% uptime, and your recovery options are that you have to provide data within 15 minutes of being down, oh boy, yeah, I would definitely be looking at this. The other thing is that you need to look at your version of SQL Server and what it offers. Remember, 2008 may not be like 2022 or even 2012, because 2012 R2 is when the dynamic quorum witness came out. Do you have multi-region clusters? Is there going to be latency? Where are they based out of? How does it perform? How is the network set up? All of those things need to be considered. And there's so many ways to set up an environment. So I kind of don't want to go into that, because I'm learning that everybody has a different way of doing it. The other thing is like, maybe you need to consider your owners in your cluster settings. Are you having a node be an owner when they're not even supposed to? These are all things. And then remember, you're only allowed to have one file witness at a time. So if you go in and try to add a second one, it will take the other one offline. One thing at the top of my mind is, if you're using a file witness, you need to have them communicate whenever they're doing anything with that file witness. Like if you have people that just go in and boot stuff all the time, and they're just going to go randomly mess with that file share, and it's connected to your cluster, that might be a bad idea. You can obviously remove the file witness with the PowerShell script, so it's not that big of a deal. But if they're going to just go in and reboot things the same time that you're doing OS patching, you can lose your cluster. Not lose it, but like it can go down and cause problems there too. So these are all factors to think about. Now, remember, no solution is completely foolproof, and split brain can happen despite having all of these precautions. Even if you designed it to be amazing, there's always going to have that like 0.1% or whatever it is, right? Okay, now part 2. I kind of want to tell you what happened with the scenario of what happened with me and my work, and the reason why I found out that the cluster was kind of going crazy and it blew up. We found out a couple of things. One, we thought we were doing good because we had node majority votes, right? Because we had 3 nodes. And what happened is, and we've since fixed this, obviously, but what happened is we found out that there's a couple of things. One, we weren't using one of the regions. We just had built it back then, and it was supposed to be used as a disaster recovery site, but it wasn't in use. It was set as an owner. That bit us. The second thing is that we needed to add a file share witness, because of the fact that if the three nodes go down, or let's say that one of the nodes go down, and you have 2 left, then you need to have an extra vote. And that adding that file witness in there added the stability that we needed, because anytime that we have, any of those clusters going down, then we still have, 2 or 3, whatever it is. It's always going to balance and give us a dynamic number. And I just looked at the time, Andy. I am sorry. I know that we don't have another presenter. I do have a little bit of a demo to do, but am I overstepping? I thought I was going to be short on time.
I say keep rocking and rolling, but Anthony and Andrew?
Yep. all good.
100% keep going.
Yep.
Okay, I am so sorry. I actually thought this was only going to be 15 minutes, but I'm a little bit of a talker. I'm sorry.
And you only wanted a 45-minute session.
I know I signed up for 45 minutes and then I was like, I'm not going to have enough content, but this is a very passionate subject of mine. So I hope that you guys are all entertained at least.
Keep going. You're doing great.
But yeah, so what we found is that there was, we had to add the file witness share, because we wanted to have a tiebreaker. We needed to remove the owner, from the node that wasn't being used for our disaster recovery. We also needed to set the automatic to the region that wasn't really being used yet to be in manual, and that solved a lot of our problems. But the main thing is that we had to add a tiebreaker. Now, during that process, the reason why I say to test in development is because I did blow up development quite a bit when I was testing this, because I kind of wanted to figure out what would work best for our environment. And unfortunately, I can't say what is going to work best for each and every person in this call without really understanding how your environment works. But I will tell you, it's a balancing act. You kind of have to know, you kind of have to test. You have to take one cluster down, your file share down, you have to add your node. You have to do a lot of playing around to see what works best for you. So my final thoughts before my demo. Use a tiebreaker. Review your configurations. Set up monitoring if you don't already have monitoring set up. Please, if you do not have monitoring set up, like, that is so bad. We should know when our problems are going to happen before our clients do. Investigate the cost. Don't go to your boss and tell them that you need to have an odd number of votes, because you're only using 2 clusters and you want to add a file share, unless you actually go back and tell them how much it's going to cost, what the benefits are, and so that they have a better idea, especially if you're going to add an extra instance. And then obviously review your budget with your boss or managers or whatever, because maybe you're saying we need to go the cheap way. Maybe we need to do like a disk instead. And maybe they do have the budget because of the SLAs and the recovery objectives that they have to carry. And that maybe they can give you more to build a more robust cluster, to prevent that from happening. And then create the documentation so that later on, that they're like, oh, well, we need to just save money and remove all of this hardware or whatever that you're doing, so that you don't have that issue happen again. And then test all your scenarios and don't do it in production. That's just bad. I mean, it's scary too, right? Okay, so this is my demo, and it's just a small demo. I built this clustered environment, and it has domain controllers and everything. It's actually pretty cool. I hope you guys can see this. I blew up my screen a little bit better. So you can see here, I have 3 nodes, okay? Now, if you see assigned vote, it's 1, and then current vote is set to 1. I want to show you what happens when I add an even number of votes or nodes. And then I want to show you what happens when I don't. So right now it's an odd number of votes and everybody has a vote. It's looking really cool, right? If we go in and we query PowerShell, because you can do everything through PowerShell, it will say the same thing. Okay, the dynamic weight is 1 for everything. Now, I'm going to go in and I'm just going to add a note because I'm feeling really good about this. And I can also remove a node because this is my own little test environment. It's kind of cool. And I'm not going to require, now this is me doing things fast because obviously I don't want to spend an hour doing this, but I'm just going to say, I don't want to run any tests, but generally you would. And I'm just going to say, okay, add this to my cluster because I'm feeling pretty good. My boss just gave me a budget. He wrote me out a check for AWS and he said I can add as many as I want. So I'm going to go like crazy and add a fourth one in there. Okay, and then while that's being done, I want to show you a couple of settings to look at as far as preferred node and stuff that we talked about. If it will let me. It probably won't, but this only takes a minute. Oh, one more thing. This is my my favorite documentation to look at when I'm looking at this stuff. If you're looking at deploying a cloud witness and you want to find out, okay, what does it require? What are the prerequisites? What do I need? For instance, like if we go to a file share, and you know how I talked about how it has to have control, it has to have access to the cluster, it needs to have, you know, the 5 megabyte free space on there. It needs to be joined to the domain. This is documentation that you can go on and you can look through on the Windows Server documentation for Microsoft. And I've been noticing that they've been doing a lot of redoing a lot of their documentation, and I really love it. Okay, so that's done. I'm just going to click finish. Guess what happened? Dynamic node voter come in and said, you know what, Amy, we don't like that you have an even number of votes. So we are automatically going to remove one. So right now, even though the votes were there, it's saying that the current votes are only set to 3, and that's to offset it. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to just say, okay, well, you know what? I'm just going to turn off that box. I don't want it on anymore. I'm just going to turn it off because I'm testing my DR, like I'm testing my configuration because my boss just gave me a really good budget. And so I want to make sure that this works because I'm in development, right? So now that it's going to turn off, we're going to see what happens. Okay, boom, dynamic quorum just stepped in and said, okay, you're offline. We can't access you. The other 3 can vote. And then if this one was primary, it would switch it to another node. Obviously, it would switch it to a couple of things. One, it would switch it to whatever preferred settings that you had. If you didn't have a preferred setting on, it would pick whatever the better option is. So like, for instance, if these 2 were set to be configured to an automatic failover, then it would possibly pick one of these. But if this one was not set and it was definitely not at that, then it would not pick that one. So that's what the dynamic quorum does. Now, if you're trying to configure these settings, I wanted to show you how to do that. If you go to, so this is my Amy trash box. This is my my cluster. I go to more actions. I can go to configure quorum. And this is telling it how you want to set up the voting. Remember, do not do this in production. And there are PowerShell scripts on this page on how to actually do it all through PowerShell. So if you have 100 clusters, don't do this manually. I'm just showing you for fun. But yeah, so you have your default configuration, you have your witness, and then you can have your advanced quorum setting. If you select this one where it says select the quorum witness, I have all of these awesome options here where I can select the disk witness, I can select the file share witness, I can select a cloud witness if you have that option available. And then if you say, I don't care if I have a quorum witness or not, you can select that, but then at the very end, it's going to say, this is probably not a good practice. I don't know if this is good, because it's going to give you a warning. It's going to say, this cluster is not configured with a quorum witness, and the best practice is to have a witness to achieve the high availability of this cluster. So that's how you would look at changing the quorum configuration. And then one more thing I want to show you, because I thought it was awesome. Actually, two, sorry. So if we go here and you go to roles, you will click on this and you will have preferred owners. This right here, you can click on and you can make any of these a preferred owner like we talked about. And you also have your failover specified period. So now you don't have to log into each node and then change this, because remember, you're doing it for the entire cluster, which is kind of cool, because I failed mine over a few times and I was wondering why it didn't go crazy. I set it to 3. So this is another thing that you need to look at, especially if you have failed your cluster over more than one time in a 6-hour period. If you get a call and your cluster is completely hosed and something weird is going on with it, and then you find out like your operations center just failed it over multiple times, you may need to go in here and adjust it and then apply it, and then you can change it back in order to get your cluster working again. And then one more thing, if you go in here and you go to configuring your quorum, you go to advanced quorum settings, you can select your voting configuration based on what nodes you want to vote. So if you think you're going to be making better decisions by saying, this guy doesn't need a vote, or maybe you don't need no nodes to vote, which, yeah, that's probably a bad idea, this is where you would do it. So anyway, that's how you would check that. And then there are options. I shouldn't be showing you this just because if you do this, I don't want you to blame me. But if you run this command, get cluster.dynamic quorum equals 0, this will turn off that dynamic quorum from making that decision. Now, you would change this to 1 or 0 or whatever, and that's going to change this. That's going to change that from happening. I don't know if I would recommend that. There's another option. If you go to, let's not remove the cluster. If you go to get cluster quorum and you do the FL, it will tell you what your quorum type is. So this is another cool option. But anyway, that's all I had today. And I'm sorry I went over. I kind of wasn't expecting that to happen. But now, if we have time, Andy, I don't know if we have time, but we can always have them post questions and see if I can answer them in the chat too. I'm good with that. Whatever you guys think.
So we do have one question in the Q&A. So should failback be set to allow failback or not? And what are your thoughts on that?
So it actually depends. I would say that it's going to depend on what your failback option is. So for instance, and I'm guessing that what you mean is that failback option on the screen. I'm thinking that you're meaning this one right here.
Yes, the question came up when you were in your demo.
Okay, perfect. So they're saying this right here, the failback. No, my preference would say no. However, my environment would not do well with this feature. And the reason why is because it just depends if you want it to automatically fail back to the preferred owner. Now, if that's going to work for you, yes, you can do that. Personally, I don't like this feature because of the fact that I want to understand what is going on with my cluster. And I also have more than 1 or 2 nodes, right? I have like, if you have 3 or 4, this option is probably not going to be good for you because you have other options to fall back to. Anyway, it just depends on your setting, but I would say don't have that selected, in my personal opinion.
Cool. Got a couple more questions coming in on the Slack channel. How would one design or plan and test for 2 quorum nodes to go down simultaneously again?
Great question. I come at a cheap rate too. I'm just kidding. I can show you how to do that. I'm good at taking things down. Just kidding. No, so if you're wanting, okay, perfect question. I love this. What I did in my testing environment is okay, so first of all, if you go into your file permissions, if you're trying to test your file share to go down, okay, because I know that we're going to talk about like the nodes going down, but if you're wanting your file share to go down first, what you do, you click on it, you go into edit, and you deny all of the permissions so it doesn't have access to it for your file share. If you're wanting to stimulate what would happen if anything happened like that first. The second thing, and the reason why I'm mentioning this to you is because you said that you have 2 clusters. You definitely do need, in my opinion, a file share for a tiebreaker. Now, if you're trying to test 2 nodes go down at the same time, I'm assuming that you have more than 2 nodes. If you don't, your cluster is just going to die anyway. And anyway, what you would do is you could go into your settings. And it depends if you're in Hyper-V or if you're in, AWS or whatever you're at. Because what I can do is I can turn off I can turn off where nothing can hit that IP or nothing can hit that network, basically. And so you'd want to do that in PowerShell some type of way. In Hyper-V, I can actually do that here, where I can go into settings and I can just make sure that it's not accessible. So basically you would want to just make sure what you're doing is essentially running a PowerShell script that hits it like that at the same time. Now, let me tell you, the reason why I'm not demoing Split Brain is because it's really hard to pre-produce, which means that we hit the lottery when it happened to our environment. It was Vegas. Everything was lit up like a Christmas tree. And then the other option is you can have AWS have another outage, and that will cause it too. So, but yeah, I would say just go in and see what you can do to make sure that you can't get any traffic to that, but test it in development.
Cool. One more question as of right now, and feel free, if you have additional questions, please feel free to throw them into the Slack or into the Q&A in Zoom. So the question here is this: how can you narrow down the cause of a split brain situation after the incident? This person who's asking stated that they were trying to use things like the error log, the Windows event log, cluster logs, but even with those methods, they really couldn't determine the root cause the last time it happened to them. They believed it was most likely a brief network interruption, but they could not prove it. So they're looking for some guidance as to what can possibly also help to narrow down what the root cause might have been.
That's a hard one, because what happened with us is that we had a AWS network blip happen and during that time, and nothing was reported during that time. We put in a ticket to them and they're like, no, that didn't happen. But then later on that we found out that it did happen. And so I think going down the path that you're going down is correct. Like reading the error logs, reading, monitoring. This is great, because app dynamics, if that was another way that we were able to find it, is because we seen that the network, if I remember right, went down all at the same time, and our monitoring tools caught it. our logs really didn't present it. And when we were pinging the listener, we were pinging the primaries, and we were looking at the clusters, we couldn't really figure out what the cause was. So I would say that it's hard because, you know, even if you have concrete proof, finding the root cause is always going to be the hardest part. It's going to be digging and digging and digging. Now, at that point, if it's going to be harder to find the root cause, than you've already tried to do, the next step is, you know what? I'm just going to move on, and I'm just going to prevent it. Because if you're assuming that the network went down and you can't prove it, trust me, it might happen again, because that's actually what happened to us. That's what happened to us. It happened twice. It actually went down again. But the thing that we learned is that you have to spend the time to prevent it. So even if you can't prove it, you could say, okay, well, I think the network went down and that's what caused it. However, if it does go down, this will prevent it from happening again. And prevention is actually better than finding the root cause. I know it sounds crazy, but, you know, and at that point, if you have prevented it and then it happens again, then maybe finding the root cause is going to be better. But it's time consuming.
All right. Outstanding. Well, it doesn't look like anything else is coming in on the chat or the Q&A. So, Anthony and Andrew and Mark, I'm going to hand things back over to you to wrap things up.
Excellent work, Amy. That's a session that is so critical to any operational DBA that's been down that road. I've been down that road. I mean, so everybody raise your hand if you have before, right? So,
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Very well done.
Absolutely fantastic session. Thank you. Okay, can I grab the screen?
Yeah, you sure can.
Thank you.